In this video, I'll be going through some common mistakes that interns make with their CPD activities. Today, I'll be focusing on domain 5.3, which is the compulsory CPD for all interns. So I'll be going through some mistakes and then I'll be suggesting how you can fix these mistakes. Okay, so let's get right into it. So now, before we start, please let me just remind you on a checklist that I developed from the Intern Tutor Manual that allows you to know exactly what is required of you as an intern whenever you are providing evidence. So one, I titled this site the quality of the evidence and then an evidence checklist. So on the evidence checklist, on the evidence that you provide or the piece of evidence that you provide, I'll first be looking at the title of the evidence, a description of what this evidence shows, an application that needs to be related to the competency standard and the behavioral statement that is being addressed, and then link with that specific behavioral statement. Next, looking at the evidence quality, we are going to look at if the evidence is valid. So the validity of the evidence depends on, it must pertain to the competency standard that you are addressing. So if it's 5.3, it must be related to the 5.3 according to the description that you have provided. There must be no factual error. So if there's calculations, the calculations must be correct. And two, the evidence must be current. So it means that it must be in that year of internship. So if you took your internship in 2025, the evidence that you provide needs to be for 2025. And your evidence needs to be authentic. So SAPC is a way to authenticate evidence. It means that it needs to have your signature. It must show that you were actually doing the work, that the tutor can verify that it's your own work. Another thing to consider in this is that if you have a prescription, a way to verify a prescription needs, you need someone else to also co-sign with you and then also identify themselves as who was assisting you in that. And then the evidence must be sufficient. So if there is more than 4 behavioral statements, you need to provide at least 75% of the evidence. So that means here you need to provide evidence for 3 behavioral statements. This is really important. Okay, so now let's get right into it. So using this evidence checklist that is provided here, this is what I'll be looking at. So we'll start by looking at the evidence that's provided and then checking if the evidence is fulfills the requirement of the checklist and if it is quality evidence. So one, we check the title, then there is a title. We check description, application, and the link to the behavioral statements. Okay, let's check the evidence. Looking at what's written here, says this is a prescription I received on the 7th of August 2025. So we can see that the date is provided. I removed the patient identifying information to protect confidentiality. Okay, this aligns with the Code of Conduct and Behavioral Statement E. Okay, discuss this and then discuss this as well. And then the prescription is for methylphenidate, Schedule 6, Evidence 13. Okay, I didn't link with this. According to the Medicines and Related Substance Control Act. Okay, my comments here. My scope of practice, this is an intern, so the scope of practice needs to be provided. And registration as a pharmacist intern allows me to handle and supply this medicine under supervision. This ensures compliance with behavioral statement B. Okay, we'll make comments on that. The duration of the prescription is 1 month, which is in line with the MRSA requirement for Schedule 6. Okay, there's requirements for Schedule 6. Requirements for Schedule 6 and ensures compliance with behavioral statement A. Okay, the daily dose is recommended. The daily dose is a recommended therapeutic range. Okay, so that means there's therapeutic evaluation that was done, and all phase 1 dispensing steps were properly completed. Let me just highlight this phase 1, and then I'll also highlight this. Now going back to the evidence, I think it is important that you have your Intern Tutor Manual with you as we go through the evidence. So let's go through the evidence that is provided here. We can see that it's covered here, there are dates, and then what they are highlighting is this specific part of the prescription. So here, please note that I just covered this so that you know client confidentiality and all of those things. So yes. So the date of the prescription is methylphenidate 10 milligram PO at 7 a.m. Take 110 milligram tablet orally at 7 a.m. Please issue 30 tablets. Okay, so now going back to what this person has actually said and what is actually provided here, just to zoom in to that specific section that I want us to discuss. This is a prescription I received on this date, so we can say that this evidence is current. So this is current evidence because it states the year of the internship, which is 2025. Okay, remove patient identifying information. This aligns with the code of conduct. Okay, so but you're highlighting this part. So behavioral statement E about the code of conduct that's in section 1.3 of the code of conduct in the GPP. You know, I think it speaks about patient confidentiality. Okay, but a better way to do it would have been to highlight this part because in this section you can see that there is information that's covered, but it's not really clear as to which information. So it's better to separate these pieces of evidence. So this statement could have been a text box here. So let's say that you say behavioral statement E here, then you add a text box in this area, then you add this information here, and then you put an arrow that shows that this is a specific section that you want the assessor to be focusing on so that they when they mark they know that they are focusing on this specific area of the work. Okay, next, the prescription is for methylphenidate schedule 6 according to the MRSA. Which section speaks about this? So mention the section or the regulation that speaks about this. This is specifically Regulation 33 of the Medicines and Related Substance Control Act, specifically stating which regulation is being applied, shows the assessor that you understand your law and the law that you are applying. My scope of practice, evidence 1, and registration as an intern allows me to handle this. This ensures behavioral statement B. Okay, behavioral statement B is applying the scope of practice and identifying the limitations. Okay, so now you can see that this person, okay, okay, let's start with the scope of practice, behavioral statement B. Here, this ensures compliance with behavioral statement B. Behavioral statement B, like I said, means that what you're supposed to do and your limitations. But now it's not really clear which part actually applies behavioral statement B. So from this entry, what could have been improved, this could have been the highlighted part. Then there would have been a text box here specifically. Okay, oh, sorry about that. Okay, better text box. Okay, so the text box. Okay, now my brain does not allow me to then continue after fixing that part. Let's see. Ah, perfect. So we can say this is linked to behavioral statement B. Okay, and then in behavioral statement B, we remember that according to my scope of practice, I can dispense a Schedule 6 medicine, but it needs to be under supervision. And then I ensured that I am supervised by a pharmacist when dispensing the medication. And then here, this was the intern name. You add another text box somewhere here. So in this text box, you can say that these are my details, which shows that I was the one dispensing this medication. And then next, you go on and say that these are the details of the pharmacist. If this was a pharmacist, these are the details of the pharmacist, and then maybe this is the signature of the pharmacist who was saying. So you add these things, or you add another text box somewhere here that these are the details of the pharmacist to show that I was being supervised. Then you link with the behavioral statement B. Then here also behavioral statement B as well. And this is not enough to actually say that you are being supervised because you're not really clear. So in this one, it's better to add text boxes so that you show the assessor what you are actually trying to achieve. If you're going to add this information here, you would have then mentioned all of these things that I covered, and then you put an arrow that comes here, another arrow that is coming here, and another arrow that is then coming to the person who was then checking your work. Okay, so now this is how you can improve with the behavioral statement B. So let's go on. The duration of the prescription is 1 month, which is in line with the MRSA. Again, please remember to state the specific act. This is Regulation 33 and ensures compliance with behavior statement A. Okay, it is behavior statement A because it's applying the law. The daily dose is the recommended therapeutic range. Okay, there is a therapeutic evaluation which we're not going to discuss now. And all phases of phase 1 dispensing were properly completed. Behavioral statement E. C. How does first maybe let's remember what does behavioral statement C require of you? Before you mention any behavioral statement, remember the requirement. One, let's say requirement. Behavior statement C says that you must apply amended legislation. Keep abreast of amended legislation and apply all relevant sections accordingly. So you saying that all phases of dispensing were properly completed, behavior statement C. What does that mean? How did you apply the law in behavioral statement C? So in this case, this requirement for behavioral statement C is not met. Let's say equals to not met. Okay. It's not met because the requirement and what is being provided does not actually match. This is most likely behavioral statement A. So this could have been behavioral statement A. Let me just, okay, behavioral statement A. Why am I saying this is behavioral statement A? Because phase 1 of dispensing is covered by Regulation 33. Regulation 33 of the Medicines Act, which requires you to evaluate a prescription and ensure compliance with the law. Okay, and this person says that all phases of dispensing were properly completed. Let's check if all the phases of phase 1 dispensing are properly completed. So here it's important that you refer to the specific sections of the GPP and Regulation 33 that specifically state what are the requirements of behavioral statement A. So for one, according to the Medicines and Related Substance Control Act, the doctor needs to provide their name, surname, and details and then include their practice number. In this case, you are only seeing the signature. Only signature. So unfortunately, it's not compliant with the law. This is not a legal prescription because the doctor's details are not properly completed here. Another thing that is a requirement from Regulation 33 is that, the Schedule 6 prescription, the quantity must be written in words and in figures. So you check all of those things according to that regulation. We can say that it does comply because the quantity is written in figures and in words. So go back to Regulation 33 and then compare this prescription according to the requirements of that regulation. If you see that that regulation is not covered in how the prescription is written, then it's a problem. This this prescription, the previous prescription is actually better because the doctor, okay, the signature is there. If they edit their name, okay, the surname is here, it's provided, and then this is MP now. So this doctor actually did include a requirement for a prescription according to that regulation. So we can say that the above prescription is better than the bottom one when it comes to complying with the regulations. According to the regulation as well, it requires that the patient's details need to be provided. So you can make comments that, you know what, the patient's details were provided, but I covered them to comply with confidentiality principles, okay? Because confidentiality is linked to behavioral statement E. So this is how you can improve the quality of the evidence. I hope I'm not missing everything, but yeah, that's about it. So in summary, when you apply your evidence, you ensure that the evidence has a title. In this case, this is the title, so it's okay. There's a description of what this shows. Okay, this is the description here. There's application. So in the application must be linked with the behavioral statement being addressed. So the application is provided, but unfortunately, there are some gaps in the application and in the linking of the behavioral statement as we've discussed. behavior statement A, B, and C. So in A, it's because you linked the MRSA. You could have been specific that it's Regulation 33, but A was applied a little better. But unfortunately, A still wasn't compliant because unfortunately, the prescription did not fulfill the requirements of a prescription. In relation to behavior statement B, it was okay, but you could have added some information about who was supervising you, what you did, and made comments about that. Then in behavioral statement C, unfortunately, it's not linked with behavioral statement C because there's no latest amended regulations that were applied in this particular evidence annotation.